So, you want to be a dungeon master.
So you want to be a dungeon master.
So you want to be a dungeon.
So you want to be a dungeon master.
So, you want to be a dungeon master.
That's great. We're here to help. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Justin. This week, we're taking a walk on the dark side because we're going over the pinnacle of villains that is the BBEG. The vast majority of tabletop role-playing games include some sort of conflict that the main characters have to overcome. And in most of those games, that conflict includes some sort of antagonist. These are your monsters, your ne'er-do-wells, your villains, and of course, your Big Beaver Energy Guy. Oh, wait, hold on.
Sorry.
No, sorry about that. Yep, I'm hearing from our producers. BBEG actually stands for Big Bad Evil Guy. Look at that. Anyway, let's get into it. But first, someone's gonna be first. Who's your favorite and least favorite villains from fiction?
Let's see.
And why?
Yeah. So I think one of my favorite villains. It's really hard to just nail it down to a number one.
No doubt.
First and foremost, but one of my favorite villains comes from the Dresden Files series.
Okay.
He's Gentleman Johnny Marcone, who is basically the leader of a crime family syndicate thing. Like, basically, he took over the mafia, and it kind of has reintroduced the organized into organized crime. So while he's this really big, bad, evil guy, because like he does do some pretty heinous shit at the inside, on like the kind of core of what he's doing, he's trying to make Chicago safer in his own weird, fucked up way. So he's kind of like this relatable guy. He's got a real relatable kind of backstory as far as why he got into doing what he does. Because basically he had participated in some hit and then accidentally killed a little girl, or not killed her, but like put her in a coma. And he felt really bad about it. And like, it's like, that's like his whole thing, is he feels really shitty about that one thing. So he basically just took over the crime families so that nothing bad happens to kids anymore.
Wow.
But he still like puts people in like vats of acid and shit, and like,
right.
murders them, like does the typical mafioso things. It's just at the core of it, it's kind of a weird, fucked up heroism almost. But
yeah.
Anyway,
no, I get it, because for me, one of my favorites, or at least when I was coming up with one to choose for this particular prompt, I chose Killmonger from Marvel. Michael B. Jordan plays him in the first Black Panther movie. So it kind of a similar idea where it's like, yes, villain does bad things, but also has like solid motivations for doing it that you can kind of get behind. Right. And he has a lot of references in the movie, at least. I don't follow the comics very closely, so I can't speak to Killmonger, the character, from a comic book standpoint. So excuse me if I make some mistakes, but like from the movie, he talks a lot about racial inequality, about this idea of Wakanda having this insane resource and how much it could help black people around the world. And they're choosing not to because it could also fall into the wrong hands. Like, you can kind of see both sides' argument for why they should keep vibranium to themselves and why they should, disseminate it around to other nations and stuff. But also, so it was just, again, one of those things where you're like, at least the bad guy has a point. At least they're fighting for something that you're kind of like,
right.
I also think that that's solid arguments. Like, you're making some good points. Maybe how you go about those, how you're putting your plan into action is a little villainous, but I get it. And it's like, so I like that. I like the moral gray area. And I think it makes the villain more interesting as opposed to just like, you think of like some Disney villains. Some Disney villains are actually incredibly well written. And then there are other villains where it's like, you're just evil. Cruella de Vil, as much as it's like a fun villain because she's just so campy and kind of like, she just is like a fucking drag queen in so many ways. But like, it's just like, no, she's just straight evil. Like, she just wants to make this fucking coat out of puppies. Yeah. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? So it's like, I like the moral gray area. I think it makes for a more interesting story.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of like the common thread between both of ours is like, yeah, it's they're fucked up and do fucked up stuff, but also their reasoning behind it is sometimes not the worst reasoning, just bad execution.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely.
And speaking of bad execution, I'll just bang this one out. Yeah. My least favorite is Thanos. I think that he's interesting. Josh Brolin does an incredible job with the voice. Like he's larger than life. He is very scary, and like just they did a great job from like, graphics and some of it. However, you get all this power. Your whole shtick is like, no, I'm trying to save the universe because there's just too many people, and so we're fighting each other over resources and da-da-da-da. And it's been pointed out before, I'm not the first person to think this or come up with this, but like, you could have just snapped your fingers and doubled the amount of resources or figured out a different way, put a little bit more time into it, and it would have been a totally different game. Like, it just felt crazy to be like, this is the solution. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what are you talking about, man? Like, that's a crazy solution. It's like, I remember learning about this in pre-med classes. There's like I think it's called the Malthusian principle. It's this really weird ethics debate. And it's not something that you would ever actually put into action, but it's just a ethics philosophy kind of conversation. And it's the idea of like, well, if we continue to cure diseases and like make life longer for individuals, then there will be more people on the planet and then less resources. So is there an argument to be made of kind of not pursuing medical progress because you need people to die in order to, so it's this, again, it's strictly a philosophical like debate kind of thing. It's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's like, of course you want to continue curing diseases, right? Like, it'd be crazy to just be like, well, we need people to die, so we got to let that population dwindle. You know what I mean? So it's like,
right.
It's a really, really interesting discussion.
Yeah, I honestly, killing half of the population, it's bad. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the solution for anything.
No, especially when you can bend reality and time and all this stuff. When you have that much stuff literally at your fingertips because you're snapping. Mm-hmm. I just don't understand why you would be like, this is the only way. It's like, no, dog, it was your first thought, and it's not always your best thought.
Yeah, no, definitely no. You could have workshopped this for a couple of days even.
You could have workshopped it. And they try and go into some of the backstory stuff about Thanos and like, especially with Gamora and like talking about how he used to do this the old school way where he would take over a planet and then be like, all right, time to murder half of your population so that you guys have lots of resources. And it's like, okay, but then they're just going to have a population boom because everything is so good. And it's just going to eventually get back to that place anyway. Exactly. You just bought them time. You didn't actually fix anything. And so Thanos is just boring to me.
Lazy.
To a certain degree, yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, from a movie standpoint, like, he was fascinating. He was interesting, and like, he was cool in some regards, straight up just as a villain, but whatever.
Yeah. So my least favorite villain is kind of getting to this Cruella de Vil argument a little bit of just somebody who's just evil for being evil's sake.
Yeah.
Seymour from Final Fantasy X. He is just the worst. So basically the whole plot of Final Fantasy X is there's this big monster that like comes around and destroys everybody's shit every few years. And like the way that they get rid of him is they have the summoner goes out and fights him. It dies for a few years and then it comes back. It always comes back. And Seymour's whole plan was to basically kidnap one of the summoners, force her into a marriage so that they could go fight Sin together. And basically the plot is whoever goes in with the summoner after they defeat Sin becomes sin becomes the big evil thing. But like, that's his whole plan, is he just wants to be this big monster thing. That's it. That's the whole reason he's in the story. That's the whole reason why he's doing what he's doing. He just wants to be a big monster. And that is just so boring.
Yeah.
There's nothing to it. It's just like, hey, yeah, I want to be super big, powerful thing, so I can be the one that goes smash stuff. Okay, guy. And yeah, like, he dies and then he comes back, and it's dumb. It's dumb. And really, and honestly, what winds up happening is like, the way that they finish the game, spoiler for a 20-year-old game, they just go in and kill the monster without doing the final ritual thing, and it fixes everything.
Whoa.
It literally, if the monster's never coming back, it's fine. Nobody else has to die because of this. It's just like, literally, you guys could have sat down and just done that in the first place, and just been done with it. But no.
Louise, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that always stinks when it's just like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that there's something to be said about making a villain who's just evil for evil's sake, because it is like less complicated. You don't have to worry about any like problematic behavior or anything. Like, sometimes people are just evil, and like that is okay to some degree, but it gets so much more interesting and memorable when there is a little bit of nuance and stuff, you know? But that's what we're going to be going over today, is just everything we can think of in regards of a big bad evil guy. Which is such an interesting phrase that seems to have just somebody started that at one point. I would love to learn the etymology of that word.
Of BBEG?
Yeah, like where it started and stuff, because it fully has, it's like, this is the word.
It is. Yeah. Like, in tabletop gaming, it doesn't matter what you're playing. This is the word for the head honcho villain guy. Big bad evil guy. I mean, and it really is just, it's good because it's nice and succinct, and you know exactly who the hell you're talking about when you say BBEG. It's the big bad.
Yeah. It's the main villain. And it like, in theory, yes, you could have it be like, it's a concept. Like, we always joke, like, in Sphinx City, there's like a physical BBEG, but in Sphinx City, the BBEG is also capitalism.
It is also capitalism, yeah.
And like, that's fine. Hey gang, we wanted to talk to you about something pretty important real quick. See, we have some really cool ideas for the future, but we need your help. You can do that by supporting us through our Patreon. At the lowest tier, you get early access to podcast episodes, access to episodes of Action Surge, our post-session table talk show, and entry into a private channel on our Discord server. At the next tier, you can get access to Bonus Action, our bonus content podcast where we talk about a huge variety of D&D and TTRPG related things, like Multi-Class Mystery Mashup, where we get 2 random classes and have to build a character, or Monster Matchmaker, where we go over our favorite monsters at each CR level, or recaps of our home campaign, plus so much more. Joining the Patreon helps us continue to grow and put out content that gets better and better as we learn, improve, and try new things. So, check out the link in the description to join the gang today. And sometimes you could like refer to a smaller boss as a BBEG, because it's like, oh, this is the BBEG of this arc, or like this fight,
right,
or something like that, you know? But whatever.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the actual kind of driving force of your plot.
Yeah, definitely.
Or really what we're going to be covering over. Yeah.
So let's get into it. You have a couple different ways that you can create your BBEG. If you're kind of looking at it from a bird's eye view, there's like 2 main ways. There's the pre-planned BBEG, one that you've thought of in advance. It's part of your world. This was, and will always be the BBEG. And then there's sort of a invented BBEG that kind of improvs their way into existence as you're playing the game, and sometimes that could mean that they are created, if you want to use that phrase, created by the PC's actions.
I really like this concept. It would basically mean for me, almost rewriting the whole campaign whenever this happens, though. Which
yeah,
is,
it would
be doable, but
for sure. Yeah, it depends. Depends on the campaign that you're running.
that's very true.
Because like, hopefully, you go into that campaign knowing that you don't have a set BBEG, or like maybe you have a stand-in for the BBEG, but you have the room for that improv, for that spontaneity of like, hey, the players were just a total dick to this one NPC.
Now it's
What if they're what if they become, they grow and they become the BBG or something like that, or maybe
that's a lot of fun.
Instead of creating it as you're playing the game, maybe it gets created during character creation based on backstories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's that way.
Solid plan.
Yeah, because it works out in so many different directions. Because like, if you're doing a pre-planned BBG, then I would urge DMs to find ways in the character creation process during like session zeros and before that and after that to nudge your players' backstories into having connections. Maybe not to the main BBG, but to some of the villains somehow, some way. Just makes things more interesting. It makes things more dynamic and like thought-provoking, and also it allows plot hooks to come about more easily.
Yeah,
because it's like, hey, this.
Yeah. That's definitely good for plot hook purposes and stuff, and that's kind of why I like the thought of creating the BBEG in session 0 because then you can kind of make the BBEG fit into the players' backstories instead of trying to do it the other way around. Yeah,
for sure. Definitely. And it's going to be different each time. I feel like most of the time when you get a pre-written module, the BBEG is going to be already pretty established, but you can even just change the BBEG in terms of personality, their mission, the way they go about their mission to fit the players' backstories and stuff like that. Like, for example, like Strahd is the most easy example to think of. Like, when you're playing Curse of Strahd is the villain. He's the BBEG. And therefore, spoilers. That's kind of set up already from the jump. But maybe you don't want Strahd to be a fucking fuckboy who's just obsessed with getting women to fall under his stupid mind control spells and stuff and like keep this entire town captive. Like, maybe you have a twist that involves a player's backstory or something like that. Or the other way around. Like, I have come up with a bunch of villains, and I have mentioned this before in previous episodes about world building and campaign writing and stuff. Sometimes I start with the villain. So the villain is like one of the first things I come up with. And obviously, I haven't even talked to players yet because I'm doing just the world building on my own. But I also I leave my villains to be like, I have a basic idea of their backstory, why they're doing the things they are, what their plan is for accomplishing whatever they're trying to accomplish. But then that's kind of it. And it's almost like a series of bullet points. So there's so much that you could fill in to make things fit. Right. As you're playing the game. Things that get revealed.
And I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about can apply to not just the BBEG, but also kind of some of their lieutenants and stuff, because it's kind of getting back to the villain that's created by the player's actions. This, maybe it's not the whole big bad, but one of his lieutenants or something, like one of his, kind of trusted advisors, or, just a random, we're in this town. Oh shit. You remember this guy from way back when? Yeah, he's running this town, and he remembers you guys.
Yeah, all of that stuff is so good because it makes the world feel more lived in and like immersive in that way. Like the actions have consequences. So all of that stuff is so fun. So good.
Yeah.
And it's like, it really depends how you go about this. Like, I've started thinking about in like other projects I've been working on and stuff, like, of this idea of putting NPCs in general in 3 categories. Okay. There's the ones that are just good. They're always going to be good guys, And then there are the ones who are evil. They're always going to be evil. And then there are the ones that are like neutral, and they can it depends on what the players do.
Right.
They could become
how do they treat
allies.
this guy?
They could just as easily become enemies.
Right.
Or yeah, it's like it depends on how the players treat that. Obviously, yeah, if they're rude, they rip them off at a store or something. Like that absolutely could happen. Or it could just be like the players decide to align with, I don't know, let's just say this group A, and therefore group B is like, oh, well, I guess we're out. I guess we're enemies now because you aligned with my enemy.
Right.
Where it's like the players didn't necessarily do anything directly to group B, but they aligned themselves with group B's opposition. So now they have to
so
fight.
now they're just gonna have to fight. Yeah, I mean, Duke's out. Let's go.
Yeah. Hey, there's this resource that the party is trying to go get, this like magical item or this special ingredient or this whatever, and they come across a group of merchants or something who are like, hey, listen, we actually really need that item too. So if you give it to us, that would be solid. The party's like, oh, well, we can't do that because we have to bring it back to the king. And it's like, all right, well, now the Merchants Guild is like, well, fuck that guy. Fuck that party. fuck the adventuring party. We hate them. We're enemies. You never know. It's it'll happen in the moment. It'll like, there'll be that thing in any DM's brain that'll just click off or click on, I suppose, where you're like, oh, this person could turn into a villain. I've just witnessed the villain origin story.
right.
Here it is.
You guys read it all there.
Yeah.
And then you hit him, a few sessions later. Do you guys remember way back when you did that thing? Guess what?
Yeah.
Here come the consequences of your actions.
Exactly. Remember that guard that you guys hired to watch your guys' stronghold, and then you fired him for no other reason than he was silly? He's pissed.
He's super bad and still silly, but he's gone more of a Joker route.
But he's gone full Joker. So many
he's still the silliest
things.
Guy.
Yeah, so like, how in depth do you need to be in terms of the BBEG's backstories and plans and stuff? And the question is, it's going to change every time. It's going to depend on you as the DM, the table, the story, the adventure module, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But I would urge you to leave some blanks. And that's always true with your world building too, is like always leave room for the player's influence.
Yeah, definitely. Because the players also want to be there to tell the story.
Yes.
Like some DMs think that the game is, oh, this is my world and you got to live in it. It's our world. We're, playing sometimes 8 to 10 hours together.
Yeah. Go write a novel at that point.
That's true. You're right. Exactly. Go write a book.
Go write a novel, and then you do have supreme reign over the entire world and story and actions and whatever. But like, yeah, playing a tabletop game, specifically a role-playing one, obviously. Yeah, it's collaborative storytelling.
Yeah, this doesn't apply to Monopoly.
We'll go over that in greater detail in a future episode, probably very soon. Maybe the next episode, who knows? But
who knows?
Yeah, I just think you want to have some flexibility there, because you could fine tune things. Like maybe the broad arching idea is like, yeah, the bad guy is trying to take over Waterdeep, and why they're trying to take over Waterdeep, you could figure out at a later date. Because the players aren't going to figure it out at level 1. They're not going to immediately figure out the BBG's entire motivation for doing evil stuff, right? Like, it's going to take them a couple times, like sessions. We're talking about the main villain, the Thanos of the story. You're not going to find out Thanos' backstory from the jump, presumably, at least not normally.
Right.
So then, like, you have time. You have time to let the players interact with the world a little bit, face off against some of the minions and lower lieutenants of the BBEG, and then eventually, based on how the players, because it's the same like when you're a player and you have a PC that you've created. I mean, this is 1,000,000% true for me. Let me know how you fit into this. But like, often, no matter how much backstory writing I do or coming up with stuff in session 0 or collaborations with the DM and other players, I find the character as I play them. Yeah. So why not do that with the BBG?
You can all find out together.
Yeah. Like, you can find out little things about like okay, yeah, he wants to take over Waterdeep, but why? Well, we just found out that like a couple of these players were born in Waterdeep, and it's like their hometown and stuff. Maybe they've actually interacted with the BBEG in the past or something, and maybe this is what happened, and this is their motivation for doing things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could expand upon it and be like, well, you know, the players, there's a lot of like players in the game who have relationships with deities, you know, a cleric, a paladin, a warlock, all these different things that have connections to the upper planes and to stuff. Maybe he just has beef against the good aligned deities. Maybe it's because he's a fallen angel. That old story.
That old chestnut, yeah.
Yeah. You know, take a note from the old John's book. From John, Mark, and Paul. And Luke. Whatever,
Can't forget
man.
about Luke.
Yeah, although they wrote mainly about Jesus, I'm pretty sure. If my biblical knowledge tells me anything, I'm pretty sure
You are correct.
the fallen angel
You are
thing is
correct.
Old Testament stuff. Anyway, but yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things when you're coming up with your BBEG. But let's get into how do we make our BBEG unique, or like what makes them unique? Because that's obviously a thing too, right? Like you don't want to, if I'm the GM, which I often am, and I'm running the story or like different adventures, like we've done, 5 or 6 actual plays. Each time I want each BBEG to feel different, to feel unique. So it's not just like the exact same mission and plot, but with different kind of flavor or something. It's like, no, that would get boring so fast. You need to switch it up.
Yeah. I mean, as far as keeping things unique, I'm gonna put unique in quotes here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say steal it. Gonna say steal it from somewhere. I do think that a lot of my more memorable and kind of fun bad guys were villains that I had stolen out of other media. I consume a lot of different things, so it's either going to be, like anime or a book villain or something along those lines. As far as like coming up with something, it doesn't have to be unique in general. It just kind of needs to be unique to your world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to be you don't have to reinvent the wheel to come up with a
100%.
unique bad guy. You can go find something and be like, oh, I really like the kind of weird quirks that this person has, of like he's got a weird way of speaking, and maybe he's kind of a more chaotic evil. I'm thinking like Joker or something along those lines, of just being that agent of chaos. But then there's also, you can go the complete opposite route and pick somebody who's super lawful but just bad. Like I'm thinking more like Itachi, of he's a bad guy, but his motives aren't necessary. Like the way that he goes about things is not just doing evil for evil's sake. There's a plan and a purpose for what he's doing.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, when I mean unique, I definitely don't mean like like come up with something completely novel without using any inspiration from anything else, of course, but like unique just in the sense of like if you play a different campaign with the same players, ideally that BBG looks different than the last one.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Just so like what makes this BBG special? What makes them stand out? And that could be because of the references that you took from anime or other IPs and stuff like that, which is super valid. I can promise you that eventually in our home game, Sword Coast Q, recaps available on the bonus action episodes on the Patreon. Go check it out. Link in the description. But eventually they'll find out a lot more about this character and their backstory and motivations and stuff like that, and also like what makes them different than the BBG from Sphinx City, which is mainly capitalism, but also he's got some other stuff going on too. And like also going kind of back to the uniqueness and also the pre-planned versus improv BBG, that villain ends up looking differently when you play the same game with different players, Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the way Zusk Burgos operates and the villains of Sphinx City operate in our actual play versus the home game version of Sphinx City are quite different, actually. Most of it is the same, right? He's still a capitalistic piece of shit billionaire who's just trying to make as much money as possible at the expense of everyone around him. Typical billionaire. But also, there are some specific backstory stuff that are very different. For example, in our home game, he's related to one of the PCs secretively. Oh, yeah, she doesn't know who her dad is. Surprise! It's this guy.
And you killed him. All right.
I think she'll be fine with it. I think she'll be 1,000,000% fine with it because he's pure evil. I didn't give him a single fucking... some of that is my personal views on capitalism. I didn't give him a single redeeming quality. Fuck this guy. So, like, that's fine. But he is technically the father of one of the PCs. But that's like that absolutely isn't true for our actual play. Right. It doesn't fit anywhere. And even if it did, it would be forced and it wouldn't make sense. So as much fun as it's been to have this little secret that's like eventually going to get revealed, because I talked to the player without giving any spoilers away. I sort of asked for consent of like, hey, is it cool if I come up with like who your dad is? I have an idea. I just want to make sure you're cool with the idea that I'm coming up with it as opposed to you coming up with it. She was cool with it. Bingo bango. Ready to go. Eventually that'll come clean. And it's slowly coming clean. Like they're like the breadcrumbs have started coming out, but that's a whole nother story. So
yeah.
So that's just like who the BBEG is, their personality, their motivations, whatever. Now that they have this motivation or this, I guess, what is their plan? What is the BBEG trying to do?
Are they seeking world domination? Are they just wanting revenge on somebody? Are they trying
is it like an assassination
unionize
plot?
The goblins?
Yeah, they're trying to become a leader of different evil folk. Maybe they are just trying to do what they believe is the right thing, the way that like Thanos and Killmonger and this gentleman, John Marconi, are trying to quote unquote do what they believe is the right thing. Maybe they're just trying to take over the world. They just want more power. Maybe they're trying to ascend to godhood or become a lich and live forever. You know, the way that the villains in Mall Madness were.
Right.
Or like an interesting other discussion is like, look at the public domains, that actual play. In there, the villains that you guys all fought, they technically were just trying to kill the illustrator so that they would have more free will.
Right.
Which you guys ended up doing anyway. But it was this weird thing of like, they were going at it from the standpoint of kind of like all the characters we just mentioned, Killmonger, Gentleman, John Marconi and stuff, of like, they're trying to do something that's quote unquote good. The way they're going about it is different because they're straight up like, if we have to kill people to get this done, we'll do it. Sacrifices, like it's all for the greater good, whereas that's not what your party was about. So it was really interesting. So what is your BBEG trying to do? And then how are they trying to do it?
This is where the storytelling gets fun, in my opinion. Like coming up with weird, convoluted plans for them to try to accomplish their goal of like, okay, we definitely, I don't know why I think that a goblin union is just the funniest thing in the world, but it really is like, be more gentle. Like, it's so silly. It came up in an actual play that I listened to a while ago. I don't remember which one, but they said it and it was the funniest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. And, I really do think, coming up with these little side plots of like, okay, well, they actually need to take control of this city because of either some resource or something that this town specifically has. They have to have it. Or, making alliances with other big bads.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah,
because
it's a million. It is so fun. It is so fun.
Yeah.
Coming up with like my personal plan of attack for something like this is first I think of like the dream. Like, what is my pipeline goal? Like my big pipe dream of like, man, if everything goes right, this is the result. And then it's smaller steps to get there. You know, you come up with your 5-year plan, and then you come up with like your mini plans of like, okay, well, I want to take over the world. Now, how do I do that? Well, I'll infiltrate every branch of the government with a bunch of spies who are undercover. And then one day, we'll all attack at the exact same time, leaving pure chaos behind, which is the plot of Sword Coast Coup, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's exactly how it all shook out.
And then in the chaos, I'll assume control or what have you, and, you know, I'll own Waterdeep.
Exactly. And I'll like set up all these contingency plans of like, well, I want the players, I want the adventuring party to go away from Waterdeep for a little bit. So I'll reverse psychology them into leaving Waterdeep to go save Nesme.
Right. You better not go to Nesme. You better
Don't
not.
open the letter. Yeah, that was so fun.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it really was like, I don't know. I've always thought about how villains would operate and stuff like that. And it's a weird experiment of like putting yourself in a villain's shoes and being like, how would I take over the world? Because, you know, I've brought up this example before, but I really like Voldemort's entire fucking plan is just going after Hogwarts. Like, dog, you already pretty much have the entire Ministry of Magic under your control.
No, but
I just don't
want
understand
the school.
Yeah, this one school in one country. Bruh, take over the rest of the world first. Go after the other countries that don't have this prestigious of a magic wizarding school, and then build up your forces, and then eventually go after the one. It feels like you rushed the whole thing. I just don't understand. That was the other thing, too, is coming up with this idea, at least for Sword Coast Coup, is that, like, the timeline of the plan.
Yeah.
How long does this plan take? And I liked the idea of like when we start at session 1, level 1, the plan's already in motion. It's been in motion for like over a year or two. The players are stumbling into the main plot as the villain's plan is already underway, you know?
Right. And that's kind of one of those things that the timeline of it is always going to be interesting because your players aren't going to be coming in at like the very tail end of the plan. You know, there's other stuff that has to happen before, you know, the final throw of the dice, so to speak. So like, otherwise it's like, why are we doing this? You know, if you make it so that they've already lost the battle, like, okay, well, it's level 1 and Waterdeep is taken over and there's all these giants and dragons everywhere. Good luck.
Yeah,
that's not as fun as trying to be there in the moment, like to stop it, you know?
Right. Or at least to build a little bit of connections to the world before it gets taken over.
Right.
Although I think that there's a world where it could be really interesting if like from the player's perspective, the story starts with the villain has already won. Not against the players, but like just in general, like their plan has already worked. They have Waterdeep. And so now the plot isn't to prevent the takeover. It's to take it back.
Right.
It could be interesting. It depends on how you do it. Because, if you have level 1 players fighting against giants and dragons, then that's fucking dumb. But it could be, like, that could be an interesting, like, isekai kind of moment of, like, the players come in, they're already level 10, you know?
Yeah. And do, like a swap memories kind of Final Fantasy VIII take. I've done that before. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. There's so many different ways you can have your villains and your conflict from an antagonist standpoint truly are such a pivotal part of the adventure.
Yeah.
It is huge. And there's just a bajillion directions you can go in. Because you're going to have some villains in there that aren't even like necessarily villains in the sense of like combat. You know, like you could have a villain who's in there who's just they're not necessarily, villain is not even the right word, but just like a source of conflict. And it's more from an RP standpoint of like, this is the librarian who's keeping us from checking out the book that we need to do the mission or something.
Yeah.
Obviously they wouldn't be the BBEG, but like,
now we have to do a cooking battle to get what we need.
Battle. Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of ideas. So then like, yeah, you also, I think it's smart, although it's an extra layer of prep, is to also come up with contingency plans and stuff like that, because sure enough, players are always going to surprise you. They're always going to be more powerful than you might think, and they're going to fuck up the BBEG's plans and therefore your plans.
and by extension yours.
And so you need to start thinking about what else your players could do, or what else your NPCs and bad guys can do if, you know, the first plan doesn't work. If plan A doesn't work, what is plan B? What is plan C? And so like a great example of that is Sphinx City with the actual play, because season 1, the players, the adventurers, they take out some high level lieutenants, but not the BBEG. And there are still some lieutenants left over when we end season 1, right?
Yep.
So now I've had to start thinking about these contingency plans. Well, they're not going to do the same plan of turning people into lizard folk. Spoilers.
What? I thought we could just keep knocking that like a whack-a-mole thing.
Yeah, they just keep trying the same thing.
Yeah, keep trying the same plan, and we're just like, nope, still can't do it.
Nope, they have a whole new... Here's the funny part, though. The main... Because, like, them wanting to turn... Again, these are spoilers for season 1 of Sphinx City, so go watch it on YouTube or listen to it on the podcast before. But, or skip the next, like, 2 minutes of this conversation. The villains wanting to turn people into lizard folk, specifically crocodile people, was the way that they got their actual main mission done, or wanted, like, their main goal
of getting a bunch
wasn't just turn people into lizard folk for the hell of it. There's a reason that they wanted to turn people into lizard folk. Now, part of it was the shitcoin thing and just to make money, but that wasn't even the main thing. That was almost like a perk. That was just like a side thing of like, damn, when we do this, we could also make a ton of money. Yeah, shitcoin was like a side plan. It was just a cherry on top. There was a very specific reason why they were turning people into crocodile folk. Why it was crocodiles was just my way of connecting with Sewer City and like that old fable of people flushing alligators down the toilet in New York City. And there's a giant crocodile who lives underneath the city in the sewers. But like, they could have turned them into anything.
They're kind of nice.
They could have turned them into anything. But so then the main plan, the number one goal of Zusk Burgos and the villains is still the same as it was last time. However, how they're going to go about achieving that plan has changed drastically.
Right.
And so I come up with this main goal. Here's the pipe dream. Underneath that, how are we going to get this done? And then here are my lieutenants. How does each of them help the plan? Like, what are their individual goals? You know what I mean? As like, if you're delegating out tasks. So it's like, I don't know, let's just say that it's like, oh, we got to do this ritual to do this thing. And that's the main plan, is to summon this creature, let's say. Okay. Right. Lieutenant 1, I need you to get this crazy ingredient for the ritual. Fantastic. Lieutenant 2, I need you to build an army, because when we summon this thing, it's go time. So start building an army. Lieutenant 3, I need you to just fuck with the party. I just need you to distract the party, get them off of our back. And so there you go. And each person has their plan. That helps you start to fill in like clues and information that you can start to breadcrumb out for the party about who to go after first and where the priorities lie. And it's just, I don't know, coming for me, at least, this has been true for me, especially with actual plays where like the pacing and like the time management is so important, is like coming up with detailed plans for the villains. Yeah. How everyone plays their part. And how the part can still be played. Like, okay, they take out one of the lieutenants. Does that mean the entire plan just fucking falls apart? It can't. Or there needs to be a plan B or a contingency plan. You know what I mean? Because like...
Yeah.
That's not a very fun actual play. If it's like, hey, we took out your lower boss. Well, fuck. There goes my entire plan. My entire plan hinged on that one guy doing his thing, and he fucked up. So, a lot of stuff to consider. And then we have motivation. Why are the villains doing this plan? Why do they care? Why are they risking their life? Why are they willing to kill other people to do these plans? Why are they doing this? What is it that they're hoping to gain? And this is where I think things can get a lot more interesting if you spend a little bit more time on it, other than, well, they're evil.
They're evil, and
they're bad people. That's why they're doing bad things.
No, but like you could make it, their beloved dog that was gifted to them by their wife has died, and now you've got John Wick.
And you got John Wick.
He's not necessarily he's a bad guy, but he's not like a bad guy.
Right. He's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. It's all about where you put the emphasis, folks. No, but it's so true. It could be something like that. It could be revenge. It could be like in Sword Coast Coup, I gave a little bit of backstory to every single villain just so that I could role play them better. And also I didn't want to fall back on the idea of like, oh, they're just evil for evil's sake. So like General Dragonsbane, as shitty as he eventually becomes, he wasn't always evil. There was a time when he was a perfectly fine person and a good military leader and all this stuff. And he fell into that trap of like, you see it a lot in comic books and like superhero movies sometimes, or even like any kind of like cop drama show. The idea of like, dude, no matter how much good I do in the world, not necessarily that, no. It's like, no matter how many perps I put away, no matter how many villains I thwart and all this stuff, there's just more villains. There's just always villains. There's always going to be bad guys. And so eventually, you just got tired of it. And you just said, you know what? If you can't beat them, join them. And that was General Dragonsbane. And then you had other villains who were like, yeah, they're doing really fucked up stuff, but it's because the true villain is holding on to the cure for their family member's disease.
Right.
Like, that was one of Dragonsbane's mini, like, whatever's under lieutenant, sergeant. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, it's really interesting thinking about why people are doing these things. Is it some sort of, personal trauma or something? Is it some sort of vendetta? Is it
having a hostage taken against them is pretty an interesting lead or like motivation, because that person could potentially be swayed to work with the party.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's all different kinds of, because that it makes things more interesting. And it allows the players multiple potential like strategy ideas.
Right.
Because that's always more fun too. Is just the idea that like how the players tackle this. If it has nuance, then that's fun, because then the players, it's not as cut and dry.
Right.
It's not just like, well, point A to point B. He's evil, we gotta go. Where it's like, well, we did find out that actually the reason he's doing bad things is because his wife is in, and so we could do it like that. You know what I mean? It just makes things more interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And also thinking about like, how is the BBEG convincing people to join their side? What are they willing to offer?
Right.
How does Corvus Cancer get a ancient white dragon to agree to be their subordinate? What is the pact there? And also the other lieutenants, Yeah. Is it a quid pro quo kind of thing? Is it straight up just a transactional thing? Is it because their visions align? They both kind of have the same goal? Is it maybe there is like some kind of weird idolization of like, some of these villains look up to the BBEG and therefore view him as some sort of like mentor or some sort of actual like leader that they're willing to follow. And then getting into allies. I mean, we've talked a lot about lieutenants already.
Talked a lot about them, yeah. But like, and it really is just kind of going back to, that same bit of why are they joining? Who are they? Of like, who are they because like in the case of like a hostage taking, because I'm just going to keep harping on this one. But in that same vein, are they a, lawful good character that's been turned against their nature, or have they always had kind of like a dark tendency that's just now
it's been awoken,
coming
like
out?
a Breaking Bad
Right.
situation?
Right.
Yeah, something to consider. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, because there's some people who just like they're still not gonna like be able to justify like murder or something like that because their loved one is in danger.
Right.
Where it's like, what would you be willing to do to save somebody? Like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm willing to die for my loved one. Are you willing to murder for your loved one?
Are you
like,
willing
that's
to
a
kill
different
for them?
fucking
Yeah.
Story, bro.
Yeah.
Ugh. Don't listen to this episode with your spouses, by the way, gang. It's gonna create some interesting conversations at the dinner table. Oh boy. Yeah, like, oof, that's really interesting. Yeah, thinking about all the different dynamics between the villain and all of these other people, because it's the same. Like when I'm DMing an adventure, especially one shots, but these short campaigns and stuff, just for ease, sometimes I always put in the session 0 kind of stuff of like, hey, your character is risking their life to do this mission, to save the world or to stop the villain or whatever, right? Why are they willing to risk their life? What is their motivation? Why do they give a shit?
Right.
And then the next question is just like, well, why are they willing to do it with the party? Like, why do they think that being in the party is the best way to go about it? And you could take those same questions and just apply them to the BBEG and their team.
For sure.
Yeah, it's just tons of things.
Because it's going to be
consider.
One of the things that makes it interesting is that it's generally going to be different for each one. Like it's, I think I touched on it a little bit in the world building episode, but Fire Emblem does a pretty good job of making it so that even though it's like kind of it's a 2D turn-based kind of boring-ish game with the dialogues and stuff, each villain has their own A personality and B their own kind of reason for aligning with the big bad. Of, one person is, he's my brother, of course I'm going to be there for him. But then also you've got another one where he's like, oh, well, he just said I could have a bunch of money. So that person's motivation is going to be way different. If it's just money that person is motivated by, do they maybe break and run when things get tough? As opposed to the person who is, this is my blood relation, I would fight and die for them. That person's probably not going to run.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah, it goes back to what we talked about in the Combat 201 episode of like, will the villains fight to the end?
Right.
Like which monsters / villains are going to fight till the bitter end? Which ones are going to try and escape? Which ones are going to give up and surrender and give information on the villain and stuff like that? And a lot of the answers to those questions lie in their motivations. How much do they believe in the cause kind of thing, have they drunken the Kool-Aid or is this a transaction for them? They're like, oh shit, no, I'm a hired sword. I don't give a fuck about this guy.
No, I'll tell you everything you want to know.
I got paid up front, that stupid idiot.
Stupid idiot.
I'm good to go. Whatever you need. Yeah.
Oh, Big Bad's killing me with a heart attack? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm out of here. See ya.
And I'm gone. So that's huge. And then last but not least, another thing to consider with your BBEG is logistics. First question I'll ask is when do you reveal the BBEG? And there's no one answer to any of this. Let's be clear.
There is no one answer to this, but I think it really depends on how long of a campaign you're playing. If it's one shot, he's in the opening scene. If it's a campaign, you might have to kill a couple of lieutenants, get a couple levels, get some hair on your chest. And then you figure out, oh, there's somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings. And even then, you might not ever see this person. You're just now starting to kind of see their influence on the people that you've been fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's so many ways to do it. I agree. The length of the campaign is the most important thing. The length of the story in terms of when you're going to reveal them. Because naturally, with a one-shot, with a short campaign, they're going to come up way sooner. Mm-hmm. But you also have like all different ways to go about it in terms of when they are revealed. Because like for Sword Coast Coup, it was revealed rather early, but it wasn't clear if they were the BBEG or not. It was just a human made a deal with Pop Bing So, this ancient white dragon, and somehow got an ancient white... I mean, they're a magic user. They referred to Pop Bing So as he has now become a Knight of Cancer. So it was assumed that this person's name is Cancer, which was correct. Until eventually they found out actually that even that is not his real name. Like that he took over, this entity took over a human's body. There was a human who was just living his life in Neverwinter. His name was Corvus Cancer, and he was just chilling. And then one day he becomes possessed, and...
That's why you don't mess with Ouija boards, people.
That's why you don't mess with Ouija boards. Put that monkey's paw down.
Put it down.
It's not worth it. So true. But yeah, it was like, but then that was it. It was just that one mention.
Right.
And then slowly it was like, okay, the players were trying to find out more information about them. And I don't think he showed his head, I don't think he reared his head again until way later in the game when he first visited y'all in like a dream or a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
and I think, that was almost like right before we went down back to Nesme. Although we knew Dragon's Bane was connected somehow.
Well,
but I don't think we ever really saw him until after we had tracked Dragon's Bane down and brought him back. And I think that's when he started actually coming to us personally. Yeah,
I think the first time he straight up visited you guys in your nightmares or dreams was maybe in chapter 7. It's like you guys were on the boat or like on your way.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's also this thing that you need to think about when you have villains and BBGs and the BBGs have plans and all this kind of stuff. Something to, at least for me, this is something I think is very important, is what does your villain do when the adventuring party starts fucking up with your plan? Because it's an interesting dynamic and it changes depending on the campaign and the level of the characters and stuff like that. Like, because if I'm planning for this campaign to go the distance, right? The idea of this campaign is that they fight the BBEG around level 18. Therefore, the BBEG is pretty fucking strong because he has to handle an 18 level fight and actually have it be an intense fight. So, as you can imagine, the BBEG is strong as hell. Well, the players start fucking around with his plan. There's a world...
Sit there and let it
exactly,
let it happen,
right? There's a world where the BBEG is like, oh, I'm just going to kill this adventuring party. And like, yeah, he probably would have just done that, and that probably actually would have made the most sense logistically. But that's not fun for the story, and that so you have to think about like, okay, why isn't he going to do that? Well, maybe it's because he actually just thinks the party is weak, and he's like, you guys aren't even an issue, actually. You think you're doing something, you're actually not doing anything. And that kind of was the case for the BBEG in this Sword Coast Coup scenario, because he's been planning this for so long that he had so many contingencies in place that you guys taking out Dragon's Bane and taking out Gallowcast and Francois Villon and all these other mini bosses, none of that mattered. It would have helped the BBG in the long run if they stayed around. It would have just made his plan even better. He would have had that many more followers and stuff like that. But it wasn't like, oh, I have to nix my entire plan. It's like, no, the plan's still good. Plan still works out great, actually. So we're fine. And then you can also just be like, oh, okay, he'll send assassins. He'll send lower level people to go take on the party.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll just send threats. I've done that before where it's just straight up like,
stop.
Yeah. And or else you better cut it out. Stop
Cut
fucking
it
with my
out.
plans, or I'm going to have to go after your hometown. I don't want to do that. And of course, you don't actually expect the party to be like, okay.
All right,
but
we're done.
At least it's like, well, the BBEG tried at least. That way it makes a little bit more sense, because it's like, if the BBG does nothing about the party fucking up with the plans, then I feel like that's unrealistic.
I agree.
And even though it's a fantasy world, it's like, well, I want it to still feel somewhat real in that way. So that's, something to think about. Back to logistics. We talked about when to reveal the BBG. There's also how to reveal the BBG. You can have it be a vision. There's a trillion ways. You can have it be a vision. You can have it be an NPC, a legend. Maybe it's in the players' backstories. Maybe it's.
I kind of would. So like this, I can see going one of two ways, but the forced failure, like, in like video games, sometimes you'll be playing a game and you're like, God, I just can't win this fight, and then you lose the fight, and then a cutscene plays, and you're like, oh, I was supposed to lose this fight. You could do something like that. Just it would only work with the right table. Like, some tables do not take kindly to forced failures or forced losses to a big bad.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But it could provide a very good show of force, like a good, like, hey, you guys are nowhere near ready to face this guy right now. Here, let me show you, and then stomp them. But don't TPK them. If you're planning on doing a forced failure, don't kill your whole party, for the love of God, unless you have some way to bring them back.
Yeah, unless it's like a weird part of the plot of like.
Right.
Because I've thought about doing that, about having an adventure that starts with the TPK, because the whole adventure takes place in like the heavens.
Okay.
But that's really specific.
Right. Yeah.
I have an idea for an Oops All Clerics campaign.
That's amazing.
Where the whole thing from the jump begins with the TPK. And then you guys are all just boom in the upper planes, and it's like, what the fuck? I thought the deities had our backs. Like, how did we die? Like, why didn't they help us at all? And then it's this whole question of like, oh, there's something interfering with the divine intervention. I don't know. I haven't figured out the whole thing. It's just that first part. But yeah, and then there's also, thinking about, if the party wants to fight the BBG early or something like that, because you're going to get that. It's such a funny thing with being a DM, is like having the humility to be okay with your players constantly shit talking your monsters and characters. Like, I remember the first time I RP'd as Corvus Cancer, and I did this crazy nightmare, all this stuff. And I think it was you and one other player who, like, totally joking around, right? Like, but as your characters were like, he's not that tough. We could take him on. And in my head, I was like, he'll kill you in one turn. What are we talking about? And it was like, I had to. It's like that. Oh God, there's a Smosh sound that's going viral on TikTok right now of Angela.
Oh yeah. I'm an adult.
I'm an adult.
Are you kidding me? Hold on. I need to calm down.
I'm an adult.
We're
here to have fun. And it's exactly that. Of like, anytime I have a villain like run away from a fight, every time it's just like everybody just is shouting, "Coward! You fucking coward!" And it's like, Justin, they're not calling you a coward. Like, you're fine. You're good, and they like you. And I have to be like, wait a minute. It's so funny because sometimes it'll be like, all right, you want to? I'll show you a fucking coward. I'll show you. Actually, he is gonna fight to the death.
Actually, he is.
It's so stupid, but yeah.
And then it's just thinking about level spells.
And then all these different things to consider with your plot, with improv and pre-planning and prep, and like how you're going to give out info, clues, exposition on the BBEG and their plan without revealing too much too early. Some of that takes practice, and some of it's just it's just part of it.
But I mean, part of it, leave notes on your on your bosses or in their, like, have some kind of a secret hidey hole that's got at least a shred of information or two at the end of your smaller boss fights.
Yeah.
You know,
We could maybe,
stuff like that.
I think there's a way to maybe do an entire episode on clues, on giving clues and giving it
Probably.
information and exposition and stuff like that. Because it is an interesting challenge, because it goes back to this idea of like some DMs have a lot of trouble with foreshadowing.
Right.
Because the second you give players a clue, they are immediately hounds. And they're like, well, this is it. This clue brings us to this location. Let's go to that location and check it out. And you're like, oh, I wasn't ready for them to go to that location yet, actually. I wanted that to be a softer clue. But they latched onto it too quickly. And so it is like a interesting give and take.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad thing. If your players are super interested in what one clue represents, let them explore it.
Yeah.
With Sphinx City, I've had a lot of fun with giving clues that point in multiple directions and then seeing which ones the players are interested in. Like in Sphinx City Season 1, again, spoilers, go listen to it. You know, when you guys take out Dr. Monotream, there were clues that sent you to the romance realtors, and there were clues that sent you to the crooked cops.
Right.
You could have gone after either first, right? It was straight up your guys' choice. You didn't have to go after the cops first.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have just changed the monster stats just to fit the levels a little bit differently, and it would have been no big deal. And then in my home game for Sphinx City, it was totally different what the players decided to do. They decided not even to go after specifically the romance realtors, but just Manfred Dubois. And so they fought him alone. He didn't have the other realtors with him. And then when they eventually fought the realtors, they fought the other two at the romance realtors HQ during a shareholders meeting.
Ah.
Yeah, it was totally different.
Yeah, we fought them in like the sewers.
Yeah. Some of it was pacing. You know, like when they fought the crooked cops, they fought them one by one.
Okay, I gotcha.
It just stretched out the campaign. Like you could we've done Sphinx City in a abridged version is like the actual play. But there's a way to do Sphinx City that takes years and years of playing. Excuse me. There's a way to do it where you take out one detective at a time, take out one realtor at a time, you know?
Right.
Or you could speed it up and be like, you take out this entire group. Easy peasy. But then just, revealing little clues where it's like, this clue will give the players just enough to want to investigate more and see how that fits in. Maybe that connects them to a location where you can get even more information. Maybe it connects them to an NPC that they are familiar with who can give them even more information. Or maybe it's just a piece that's like, you need another piece of information in order for this to make sense. You found one half of the key. And it's like, until you get the other half of the key, that it's just a half of a key and it makes no fucking sense.
Right.
And sometimes that's okay too, where they find a clue and it's like, this clue is meaningless. And then you find something else and you're like, oh, that's why.
Now it makes sense.
So,
yeah.
So much to do. Let me ask you this, as we were closing up, out of our actual plays, who have been your favorite villains from a player's perspective?
Monotream is silly and fun.
Oh, yeah. Daffy Duck voice.
Yeah,
Small platypus man.
Monotream was super silly and fun. Also the romance realtors, I love the little like sphinxy thing that they did where they like transformed
they fused
into, like,
together.
Yeah, they like Voltroned. That was pretty dope.
That was a really cool idea. I actually came up with that because in our home game, like I said, they took out Manfred Dubois first, right? The Minotaur.
Right.
Which only left the Aarakocra and the Leonin. And so they fused and became a slightly lesser Sphinx. A Sphinx that didn't have massive bull horns. And so it was like, once I did that for the home game, I was like, oh, what if all three of them had that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, depending on who fuses, it changes the ultimate outcome. That could be really interesting. And that's what kind of ended up happening.
I think all of them have been fun. I wish we would have had more time in Mythos to explore the big bads in Mythos. We had like literally a half an hour left by the time we got to them. So
no doubt.
But I really liked the idea of it.
Yeah, it was close to home. That one was really fun too. that one was really challenging too because there's 6 players. And
Yeah.
some of your guys' builds were made for investigation. So it was just like, oof. Having these clues it was so hard leaving clues that were just vague enough to like get you interested and for it to kind of start building up, but like not to totally give things away. That season was, from a writing standpoint, quite challenging.
Yeah, I'm excited to do a longer series with Mythos this year.
Yeah, same. I still have to figure out some stuff. I have nothing planned for that one yet. It really depends because it's like, yeah, what is the next vibe here? Depends on like when we schedule it and when we're planning on having it come out. Because it could be a spring break thing. Which was the original plan was for it to be a spring break adventure. Like your characters are on spring break and they have to go do something crazy. But maybe it's a summer break thing. It all depends on like when it's coming out. That was the original plan, was for to have it coincide with when the show comes out. But
gotcha.
That might not, because we started pre-recording, that might not be feasible. So we'll see. We will see. And remember, as always, this episode is brought to you by America's #1 grapefruit flavored beverage, Fresca.
No. Stop it.
Ice
That's all we can get
cold,
into
it's always
this
best.
time. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at So You Want to Be a DM, or you can ask us a question at soyouwannabeadm@gmail.com. If you like the episode, don't forget to give us 5 stars and a review wherever you found us, and check out our Patreon and our Twitch page with the link in the description. Join us next time for more Dungeon Master tips and tricks.
Bye.
See you.
And now I have the honor of giving a shout out to the members of our Patreon gang. Nub Muffins, may Paylor's light shine upon you. And then there's Lee, Talkscreen, Tappy, and Molly. We appreciate each and every one of you. Tune in next time for more tips and tricks from So You Wanna Be a DM.